June 23, 1972. The Oval Office. 6 days after 5 men were caught breaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate Hotel, President Richard Nixon is speaking with his Chief of Staff, H.R. Haldeman. The tape is rolling. Nixon does not know it will one day destroy his presidency. He tells Haldeman to call CIA Director Richard Helms and deliver a message. Tell Helms that investigating the break-in will open up, in Nixon's words, the whole Bay of Pigs thing. Tell him this involves Cubans, Howard Hunt, and a lot of hanky-panky. Years later, Haldeman will write in his memoir, "It seems that in all those Nixon references to the Bay of Pigs, he was actually referring to the Kennedy assassination." The President of the United States was using the murder of his predecessor as a threat to silence the CIA. Richard Nixon recorded over 3,700 hours of conversations in the White House. Most of them are about politics, policy, and profanity. But buried in those tapes are some of the most disturbing references to the JFK assassination ever captured on a presidential recording. Nixon did not just reference the assassination once. He returned to it again and again, using it as leverage, as a weapon, and possibly as a confession of what he knew. What did Richard Nixon know about who killed John F. Kennedy? The answer may be on the tapes. If this investigation changes how you see American history, subscribe now. Nixon leans forward in his chair, voice low but urgent. The tape is rolling. At 10:28 a.m., Haldeman speaks first. "We've run right into the middle of the Bay of Pigs thing could open up again if we go further." Nixon listens, then gives his order. "All right, fine. We'll play it tough and tell them the whole Bay of Pigs thing could open up again if we go further." He doesn't explain. He doesn't have to. Haldeman knows what to do. The message is clear. The president wants the CIA warned. If the FBI keeps digging into Watergate, the past will come spilling out. Cubans, Howard Hunt, and something even darker. Nixon repeats the phrase, sharpening it. Tell Helms that investigating the break-in will open up the whole Bay of Pigs thing. This involves these Cubans, Hunt, and a lot of hanky-panky. The language is deliberate, almost rehearsed. Nixon is not talking about a failed invasion in Cuba. He's invoking a secret history, one that everyone in the room understands is dangerous. The tape captures the calculation, the pressure, and the threat. Haldeman's later memoir will claim that Bay of Pigs was code for the Kennedy assassination. On this day, the Oval Office becomes a chessboard. Nixon is moving pieces, using old secrets to keep new ones buried. The President of the United States is threatening the CIA with the story of a murdered president. The next move is up to them. Hidden microphones were everywhere. From February 1971 to July 1973, Richard Nixon's White House captured nearly every word spoken in the Oval Office, the Cabinet Room, and even at Camp David. The system was automatic. No need for buttons or tape switches. The moment Nixon or one of his aides walked into a wired room, the reels began to spin. Over the course of 2 years, those machines recorded more than 3,700 hours of conversation. Every policy debate, every private grudge, every whispered threat, preserved on magnetic tape, locked away behind layers of secret. The Miller Center catalogs these tapes, phone calls, late-night plotting, offhand remarks that would have vanished into history if not for the hum of the recorders. The scale is almost impossible to grasp. Most tapes are routine, some are mundane, but buried within this vast archive are moments that changed American history. The June 23, 1972 conversation is just one sliver, a few minutes out of thousands of hours. Yet, in that brief exchange, Nixon's words cut through the noise. He doesn't just mention Watergate or the Bay of Pigs. He ties together Cubans, CIA operatives, and a past that still terrifies the men in the room. Why does this single clip matter? Because in an ocean of routine business, Nixon chose his language carefully. He knew the power of secrets, and he knew who might be listening. The question isn't just what he said about the Bay of Pigs thing, it's why. Out of all the hours of tape, this moment continues to raise the same question. What did Nixon really know about the killing of John F. Kennedy? And what else is hidden in the archive, waiting to be found? Richard Nixon's name appears in the Baker Hotel Register on November 21, 1963. He arrived in Dallas for the annual Pepsi-Cola Bottlers Convention, a scheduled business trip that placed him just blocks from Dealey Plaza. The event drew national attention. Nixon's press conference that evening took aim at President Kennedy's foreign policy, and the Dallas Morning News headline the next morning read, "Nixon predicts JFK may drop Johnson." By 9:05 a.m. on November 22nd, Nixon's flight departed Love Field for New York. Kennedy's motorcade would not reach the same airport until hours later. In a New York taxi, Nixon first heard a passenger shout, "Kennedy's been shot." At first, he thought it was a mistake, but as he entered his hotel, the news was confirmed. The available. The paper trail is thin, but it is real. Nixon's presence in Dallas, his critical remarks, and his late-night call to the head of the FBI add another layer to the story, a layer of personal stake and silent witness. The evidence places him in the orbit of the crime, but not within its inner circle. The gaps in the record remain, waiting for release. The story of Watergate's burglars begins more than a decade earlier, in the shadowy planning rooms of the Bay of Pigs invasion. Richard Nixon, then vice president, chaired the covert planning group that greenlit the CIA's anti-Castro operation. His role wasn't ceremonial. He helped push funding through Congress and worked closely with the agency's paramilitary wing. The invasion failed spectacularly in April 1961, but it left behind a network of operatives who would not vanish with the smoke in Cuba. 3 names anchor that network: E. Howard Hunt, Bernard Barker, and Frank Sturgis. Hunt, a former CIA officer, drafted the invasion's psychological warfare playbook. Barker, a Cuban exile, handled logistics for the Exile Brigade. Sturgis, a gunrunner and adventurer, built contacts from Miami to Havana. When the operation collapsed, all 3 returned to a world of clandestine jobs and off-the-books assignments. But their careers didn't end in 1961. They migrated from one covert mission to the next, always circling the same corridors of power. By 1972, these men had new titles. Hunt was now a White House consultant. Barker and Sturgis were part of the break-in team at the Democratic National Committee. Their names appear on both CIA personnel files from the Bay of Pigs and the Watergate charge sheets. The overlap isn't accidental. The same skills, breaking, entering, bugging, and keeping secrets, were in demand in both Cuba and Washington. Nixon understood the potency of this covert cadre. When he told Haldeman to warn the CIA about the whole Bay of Pigs thing, it wasn't just a reference to a failed invasion. It was a reminder of the men who carried secrets from one scandal to the next, men who knew where the bodies were buried. The code word carried weight because the same faces kept reappearing, from the beaches of Cuba to the corridors of the Watergate complex. The invisible thread tying these events together was not just history, it was personnel. The White House tapes preserve more than strategy. They capture the language of power, coded and precise. On June 23, 1972, the smoking gun tape rolls, as Nixon tells Haldeman, tell Helms that investigating the break-in will open up the whole Bay of Pigs thing. This involves these Cubans, Hunt, and a lot of hanky-panky. The phrase is repeated, sharpened, and left hanging in the air. Nixon doesn't elaborate. He doesn't have to. The meaning is clear to everyone in the room, but the public transcript offers only hints: Cubans, Hunt, and something dangerous beneath the surface. 8 months earlier, another tape records Nixon's Oval Office meeting with CIA Director Richard Helms. The agenda, scribbled in Helms' own hand, reads, Bay of Pigs, DM, JFK assassination, who shot John. Nixon presses for files on all three. He asks Helms directly, "You've told me before that you've heard something about who shot John." Helms answers, "I've heard rumors, but nothing official. I have no document that says who shot John." The exchange is brief and clinical, but it locks the Kennedy murder, the Bay of Pigs, and CIA secrets into the same conversation. Haldeman would later write in his memoir, "When the president refers to the Bay of Pigs, he is actually talking about the Kennedy assassination." No tape ever spells this out, yet the pattern is there. Nixon invokes the Bay of Pigs thing as a threat. Helms recoils, and the files Nixon demands never surface. The tapes reveal a president using old scandals as leverage, hinting at secrets that remain just out of reach. The language is careful, but the pressure is unmistakable. The evidence sits on tape, waiting for someone to connect the dots. Nixon's demand for the CIA's deep secrets did not come as a passing remark. On June 23, 1972, he gave a direct order. Get the files. The president wanted every document tied to the Bay of Pigs, the DM coup, and anything that might connect to the Kennedy assassination. The request moved down the chain. John Ehrlichman was told to press H.R. Haldeman, who in turn leaned on CIA Director Richard Helms. The message was blunt: deliver the files or explain in writing why not. Helms, a veteran of covert wars and bureaucratic knife fights, pushed back. He cited national security, the protection of sources and methods, and the agency's legal obligations. The files, especially those concerning the Kennedy and DM assassinations, would not be handed over without a fight. The paper trail grows thin at this point. The Nixon Library's holdings list every major decision from this period, but the memo that supposedly documented the president's order has never surfaced. Researchers have filed Freedom of Information Act requests, combed through National Security Council indexes, and searched the CIA's own archives. The result is always the same: redacted pages, missing entries, or a blank spot where the order should be. Even as Nixon's team pressed for compliance, Helms made it clear some secrets would stay locked away, even from the president. The tension between the White House and the CIA was not just a matter of paperwork. On May 1973, Haldeman recorded a conversation noting that a key memo had gone missing. Ehrlichman later testified that the agency had stonewalled, refusing to turn over the most sensitive files. The missing memo became a symbol of the larger struggle, a president trying to weaponize intelligence, an agency determined to protect its own. In this contest, the stakes were more than political. They were about control over the country's darker history, and who, if anyone, could force the truth into the light. The story of the missing minutes begins with a reel of tape, a foot pedal, and a question that refuses to die. On June 20, 1972, the White House recording system captured a conversation between Nixon and H.R. Haldeman. But for 18 minutes and 15 seconds, the tape offers only silence. No voices, no clues, just a faint electrical hum. The official explanation came from Nixon's secretary, Rosemary Woods. She testified that she had accidentally erased a portion of the tape while answering a phone call, her foot pressing the pedal as her hand reached for the receiver. But forensic investigators from the FBI's audio lab found something the public was never supposed to see. The gap wasn't one long accidental wipe, it was 3 separate erasures, 3 deliberate overwrites, each with a distinct magnetic signature. The lab's report, later entered into the Senate record, detailed the sequence: an initial erasure, a brief pause, then 2 more passes, each scrubbing the original audio deeper into oblivion. Woods herself tried to demonstrate the accident for the Senate. She stretched awkwardly between the phone and the tape machine, recreating what she claimed had happened. The demonstration convinced almost no one. The evidence pointed elsewhere. The erasures match the timing of a conversation about Watergate hush money, the Bay of Pigs, and the CIA's hidden files. The missing minutes fell at the very point where Nixon's strategy was shifting, from containing the money trail to invoking the threat of old secrets. Technicians noted that the tape's magnetic layer bore the hallmarks of a triple overwrite, an intentional act, not a mechanical slip. The chain of custody raised further questions. The original tape passed through the hands of Rosemary Woods, then to Nixon's legal team, and finally to the National Archives. Along the way, the gap grew from a minor blip to the most notorious silence in American political history. Allen Dulles, the former CIA chief, had once lost his post over the Bay of Pigs. Gerald Ford, a Warren Commission member, would later pardon Nixon. The missing minutes sit at the crossroads of these names, a blank space where the truth might have lived. The science is clear. Someone erased those words on purpose. The motive and the content remain locked away. Mainstream historians point to the record and say Nixon never names a killer. The phrase Bay of Pigs appears on the tapes, but nowhere does he spell out, in plain language, that he's talking about the Kennedy assassination. The October 8, 1971 tape shows Nixon asking Helms about who shot John, but the context is ambiguous. In every official transcript, Bay of Pigs is a stand-in for embarrassment, not a confession. The CIA's own summary calls it a catch-all for covert operations, not a cipher for Dallas. The erased 18.5 minutes? The official explanation is an accident, not a cover-up. Skeptics argue that the missing memo, the lost Dallas records, and the lack of a smoking gun quote all add up to nothing more than shadows and speculation. But the pattern is hard to ignore. 1. Nixon was in Dallas the day before Kennedy was killed, and he called Hoover that night. 2. He helped plan the Bay of Pigs, then watched its veterans, Hunt, Barker, Sturgis, cross over into Watergate. 3. On tape, he threatens the CIA with the whole Bay of Pigs thing and demands files on both the Bay of Pigs and the DM coup. 4. The key memo about those files vanishes, and the agency stonewalls. 5. The most crucial Watergate tape is deliberately erased, and the gap falls right where the cover-up strategy pivots to old secrets. Think about what that means. No tape ever catches Nixon saying, "I know who killed Kennedy." But the evidence, his words, his orders, the pattern of missing records, draws a map of pressure, threat, and concealment. The official story insists it's all coincidence, a tangle of Cold War secrets and political paranoia. But the pattern remains. Sometimes the most important recordings are not what was captured. They are what was erased. You decide. Decades later, the tapes remain incomplete, 18.5 minutes forever missing, key files sealed, and the chain of secrets unbroken. Nixon's words, "These Cubans, Hunt, and a lot of hanky-panky," echo in every redacted memo and vanished page. Today, official answers still slip through the cracks. Sometimes the most important recordings are not what was captured. They are what was erased. You decide.